IndieQuest, your celebration of the indie and obscure. My name is Steve, or Blink, you can call me either. I'm one of your hosts, and I am joined today by just one of my illustrious co-hosts, and that is the one, the only, Captain Drachma. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I think you just made about half of our audience tune out now. Hopefully that was enough to get our download count, at least, but... Yes, unfortunately, Josh, well, fortunately for him, he was in the middle of a big move. Honestly, is this the third move in podcast history, maybe, for old Josh?
I think so, yeah.
I think that this one is one of the ones that he's most excited for. So based on his Discord chatter, it sounds like he's pretty pumped for this move. But yeah, just going to be myself and Steve today. So hopefully the diehards are still with us and are going to listen to us talk about some indie games.
Yeah, maybe what we should have done is not mentioned that he's not here and just gone back and forth and see how long it was before people noticed, where for a while they're like, wow, they're really talking over Josh. They're really not giving him a word in edgewise. And then at some point they'd realize what's going on.
I could go back to one of our old episodes and just like pull out a Josh like, yeah, or oh, something. Just right. Just little snippets throughout the entire episode until we finish it off. So,
especially if you cut in some of like the main cut in the intro, cut in the like introduction of the quest log. We can make it seem like he's here. All right, we have the technology.
Exactly.
But yeah, otherwise, how's life, buddy? What's new and exciting in your world?
Oh, it's still the dead of summer. I know we always have to talk about weather every other episode at least.
It's true.
I've talked before about how I don't have air in this room, I think, on the podcast. I've at least mentioned it to you and Josh.
Yeah.
But it always seems to be as hot as possible every Sunday when we record. And I close the windows and I shut off the fan because I don't want any background noise. And it just makes me a sweaty boy in this office. So that's how I'm feeling. The other new thing, maybe more exciting and less disgusting thing, is we have decided to get another puppy soon. So,
have you picked out the breed yet? Do you know what one you're going with?
Yes. So we currently have, and I can't remember if I've talked about this on the show or not, but we currently have a Redbone Coonhound. So for anybody out there that doesn't know the breed, it isn't a very popular breed. Coonhounds there's a lot of different kinds of coonhounds, but he's a Redbone. If anybody's familiar with the book or movie Where the Red Fern Grows, it is the dogs from that book/movie, and we are getting another Redbone. We love our dog. Honestly, my wife was a little bit up in the air about whether or not she wanted to get another Redbone, but after some convincing, got her there. We love our dog so much that we are, of course, going to compare any other dog to our dog, and it's hard when it's like, oh, we're getting another dog that's going to look almost identical to him, so it's just going to be kind of weird. But she was like, well, if we're going to get another Redbone, I would prefer to get it when Hunter is still around and in good shape. That way, there's a nice transition. So he's about 7.5 now, so looking towards the end, or at least on the other side of the hill for him. So it'll be a good for him, and a nice transition for us to get a puppy, I think.
Yeah, he can raise up the young and teach them the ways of the Drachma household. All right, here's what you got to do. Here's how you got to beg to get the treats that you want. Dude. This is the kid that's a little more favorable towards you. He's probably going to be the sucker that'll give you some table scraps. That type of stuff.
Yes, he is so good at that. That's what we've talked about. My wife says, I really want Hunter to teach him all sorts of stuff. I'm like, yeah, he'll teach him how to, look up on the table when we're eating and put his paw on our leg. Like, I'm dying over here. Like, dude, you just ate. You're good.
Yeah, I know for a fact that you're all set. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. I look forward to hopefully meeting the dog at some point.
Yes.
Bring him on camera.
For sure, we'll do. How's everything going over in Minnesota? You getting things prepared for the old Polycon over there?
We are. I don't have to do much preparing at all. I just have to be ready to show up when the time comes. But otherwise, yeah, things are good here. My kid learned how to high five today, so big moment. Yep. He
Heck
thinks you got to do it like
yeah.
1,000 times in a row. He like machine guns that thing. Pep, 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 pep. But still counts. And he's learned the phrase, uh-oh. And so now he just walks around waving at things and going, uh-oh, uh-oh.
Yep.
And it's like, all right.
It's uh-oh, or early on when I think my son was learning to talk, he would constantly say no, but to everything.
Oh.
You know, it's like, well,
Yep.
that doesn't mean what you think it means there, boy. But I saw in the Discord the other day, we have a memes channel in the Discord, and somebody posted something along the lines of, I've been giving my kid high fives for the past 2 years, and I'm about to hit him with the old too slow, and he's not going to be prepared for it. Just straight high fives for 2 years every day, and then you hit him with a too slow one day. That would be devastating.
Ooh, gotta add in the hair slick back too.
Yeah, yep.
Oh, really shame him. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give my kiddo a little bit of time before he learns that dad is the alpha high fiver. Okay?
Love it.
It's only reasonable. He can have his moment now when he's 1 year old. So, but you know, every episode we always ask people. We say, hey, send us a dang email. We want to hear from you, and we have one here that someone wrote in. Very kind of them, and so we want to read it off, and you know, hopefully folks can get a couple of game recommendations out of this. So I'll kick us off, and then we can go back and forth during the actual games themselves. But yeah, we got an email here from one Ava Howison. Apologize, Ava or Eva, however you pronounce it, if I pronounced it wrong. Says, so I've pretty much just started listening to the show and started at episode 1, meaning I'm a bit behind. So I don't know if you've already played these. I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm not going to be the person that says don't go listen to our older episodes, but I will say if you're starting at the beginning and you're liking the show, I have good news for you moving forward. All right. I think you're going to find that it really settles into its groove and gets good here. So
The funniest thing about that comment, Steve, and I was thinking about it as you were saying it, because I don't necessarily, I wasn't on the early episodes. I like to think that the later episodes are better because I'm on it and hopefully I bring some sort of quality. But the funny thing about saying, hey, if you're starting there, those people are never going to hear this until it's too late.
yeah,
Ava
true.
might not hear this for another half a year, depending on the pace. So how's it going from the past or the future or whatever? So
Yeah. How was 2024? We're way off in the future now.
yeah,
so,
exactly.
well, hopefully things are going well. All right. But they list off a couple of game recommendations here, so I'll take the first one. They say, Turnip Boy commits tax evasion. They say it's a 4 out of 5 for me. Pacing's a bit weird, but it's a super fun and short game. It also has a sequel, Turnip Boy Robs a Bank, that I haven't played yet, but is apparently better. And yeah, I don't think that we've brought this one to the show. I have played Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. It's a very fun sort of in my brain, kind of like a snack food game. You know, it's you pop it on, you poke around for a couple hours. It's got like a real sort of lighthearted sense of humor, plays on some tropes and stuff like that. It's a solid time, so good recommendation. I have not played Turnip Boy Robs a Bank though.
It's a little bit Minute-esque, right?
Yeah,
A little bit in the way of Minute. Yeah.
yeah,
I've
really
heard
good
it's
comparison.
Zelda-like in certain ways. But next game here that Ava recommends is Carto. Also a 4 out of 5. Really solid puzzle game with a unique gimmick. Also pretty short, a bit repetitive, but I still liked it. And I'm happy to announce, Ava, you would have already listened to this episode by now if you're going through our entire back catalog. But we have covered Carto. I specifically covered Carto. It is on the side quest. Very fun little game. Fun puzzle game where you can kind of move the tile pieces around to create the map and move things as they need to be so you can venture forth as your main character. I agree. It's probably, I would also give it around a 4 out of 5, maybe a 3.5 out of 5, I think.
Yeah, solid choice there. We've got one that I have not played. I don't think you've played it either. It's Roki, which for them is a 5 out of 5. They say it's the first indie game I ever played and the first game I ever beat. Holy wow.
This person was born in 2003.
No kidding. All right. Enjoy your youth while you have it.
Seriously.
Says, played it with my dad the first time through, but keep returning to it years later. Well, now I kind of want to go experience it just to see what it would be like to have this, to my mind, somewhat random indie as like your formative game experience.
Have you ever even heard of Roki?
I have heard the name, and I can sort of vaguely picture like the key art that you'd see in like the Steam banner, but I don't know too much about it.
I am absolutely intrigued about that game, so I will be looking it up after this episode. Steve, why don't you take the next one as well, because the next one I know you have played.
That's fair. We've got The Messenger. Says 5 out of 5. I'm playing it right now, and it's the first time I've ever played a game in this style, a ninja platformer sort of thing. I'm really loving it and can't put it down. Also, the story is surprisingly twisty, and the dialogue is great. Yes, I love The Messenger. I think it's very, very much a classic indie. They did such a good job with that game. Soundtrack is incredible, and if you like the story and the sort of like sense of humor, the writing, the dialogue, and you're into turn-based RPGs, you'll like Sea of Stars as well, because it carries forward some of that energy into a very earnest, like very solid, modern turn-based RPG that's throwing back to older games of that style. But yeah, I love The Messenger very much. Oh, also, if you're looking for more ninja platformers and you want another good one, check out the game Cyber Shadow. I also really liked that one. And you brought, what was the name of that one? Vengeful Guardian Moonrider?
Wow. You pulled that one right off the dome. That was impressive, Steve. I swear, everyone out there, I did not edit anything. Steve said, what was that one? Vengeful Guardian Moonrider? That's just the wildest thing I've ever heard. I thought for sure you were going to pause and I would just bring in the game title there, but kudos. Nope. Yeah, that is also a very good robot ninja game. But yeah, we were chatting a little bit about The Messenger in our little group chat amongst us co-hosts, and one that is very surprising to this point that it is not on the quest log, for sure. So,
yeah. We'll just say stick a pin in that, people.
Yes. All right, the fifth and last one that Ava recommends is Spiritfarer. 5 out of 5. I cried so hard during parts of this. Really calm, though, and a really nice game to play on a rainy day with a cup of tea. I have wanted to play Spiritfarer for a long time based on the art style, based on everything that's going for it. I just haven't done so yet. And I think the main reason I haven't picked it up yet is because, if I remember correctly, it's a little bit chunky. So it takes a little bit of time.
Yes. That's been the only thing that sort of deterred me too. I have a copy of it on hand ready to play. I know it has a reputation of being phenomenal. And I have several friends who have played it and have said great things about it. So kind of all the cards are stacked up. But every time I go to look, I want to say it's like 20 hours or something like that. I don't know if I'm misremembering that, and I'm not looking up how long to be right now, but I remember it being like a lot longer than you'd expect. In my head, it would be like a 4-hour game. Mm-hmm. And so I just haven't. Whenever a game gets up to like 20 hours or so, my brain is always like, that's like a faster like Super Nintendo RPG. Like yes. I could get through like Breath of Fire 4 or something, Breath of Fire 2 in that amount of time.
Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, any of those. So I'm like, okay. Not that doesn't mean I won't, play a great indie. If only I had a platform to talk about indies that would incentivize me. But I just, for whatever reason, that has been the anchor.
It's the exact same thing for me, and honestly, probably isn't great coming from me since I just brought another Crab's Treasure, which took 20 hours. But that is a recent game, so it has a little bit of incentive there. My current game that is similar to Spiritfarer and is in that same like reason I haven't played it yet is Omori. I really need to get around. That's another one. Although it came out, I think, only like 4 years ago, so maybe isn't quite as old as The Messenger, but it's just one of those games that I'm surprised isn't on the quest log yet, and it's probably the big reason why is because it takes some time to play through, but it's been sitting in my Steam library for a while. I need to get around to that one for sure.
Yep, I'm the exact same way. And, you say, it's newer, it came out only 4 years ago, but it's one of those things where I remember when it came out, I was interested in playing it like right then and there, like potentially even day one. I didn't get around to it. And then now 4 years have gone by and I have that entire time well-intentioned meaning to play it and just still never gotten around to it. So time will slip by fast. There's more good games than there is good hours in the day.
That stuff happens to me sometimes too. And I think about what if, taking this year or something recent, for example, what if I didn't play Animal Well when I did? That I wouldn't have that experience. I would hear all these other people clamoring for it, but I don't have that experience. So I don't have this. Like, I can't imagine my life without playing that game. So it's like, man, what if I had played Spiritfarer? What if I had played Omori? My outlook on games would be completely different. It happened this year with Inscription. So, yeah, there's so many games out there, so many good ones.
There is definitely a type of game you have to play, or you should play in the initial hype wave.
Yes.
It really benefits the game.
Ava finishes with, anyways, I'm really enjoying listening to you and getting new game recs, so thanks a lot, smiley face. And Ava, hopefully you made it to episode 25, 26-ish, and you're still here, because that's when I come on, and I would like to know that our retention stays high at that point, but yeah.
And you're not allowed to just look at the quest log and then not listen to the episodes, all right? There's an unspoken agreement that if you're liking the show, you keep listening to the show, all right?
Wow, that is like a secret cheat code. I didn't even think. I honestly never really thought that was. As soon as somebody discovers the quest log, they could be like, "Oh, I want to go listen to this one, and I'm going to go right to episode 33 and listen to whatever's on the quest log that they want to hear." That's I guess still sort of nice for certain people, but yeah, hopefully people are listening for the entertaining hosts as well as the games.
Yeah, we can only hope that, even when the most entertaining host isn't around, we hope that that's still why you're here.
Exactly.
Still why you're here. But worry not, folks. We still each brought a delightful indie game to discuss with you today, and we're going to talk about them right here, right now, so we can ultimately place them on the quest log. What is the quest log, you ask? You've never heard of it before? This is your first episode somehow? Well, the quest log is our giant, basically recommendation list of cool indies that we think are worth checking out. Just to make it a little more dramatic, a little more fun, we subdivide them into two categories. We've got a main quest, which is a game that we think is kind of an easy recommendation, top of the class, best in show, sort of. These are games that we feel like, have potential to be all-timers or have potential to have real wide appeal. And for whatever reason, they stand tall, shoulder to shoulder with giants. And then we have the side quest, which is a game that is still phenomenal, or at least it's still good. I guess I wouldn't say maybe they're not all phenomenal, but we brought it to the show, so we still recommend it, and we still think it's a good time. But, maybe it's a little more niche in terms of the type of people that might be into it, or, maybe we connected with parts of it, but there's others that didn't quite stick in the same way. All in all, still a game worth checking out, though, and you should definitely treat both of those lists as recommendations. And if there's anything on that list, on either of those two lists, that you think is interesting, it still has our endorsement. It's really just the difference between a thumbs up and 2 thumbs up.
And it is also fair to say that all of everything we put on here is our subjective opinions. We've had so many listeners that are in our Discord that say, why is this a side quest? And then why would this be on the main quest? I didn't like this. And totally understandable. Get it. And there's plenty of criticism for either way. So if you go and decide to check out a side quest game that sounds interesting to you, it could have very well been a main quest to you on that day. So
yeah, could have been a main quest to us too. Turns out art and our experiences with it is a subjective thing. Sometimes we look back on the quest log ourselves and we say, what was I thinking? Mm-hmm. That is not where that belongs. Or, sometimes things age better or worse, and you look back on something 6 months later and you're like, you know what? There's a little caught in the hype wave, or you know what? Maybe I was being a little bit of a harsh critic there. But at the end of the day, it's still on the list. It still feels good. If you want to access that list, by the way, it's at IndieQuestPod.com. That is the direct URL straight to it. We generally keep it pretty up to date as episodes drop, so you'll be able to see everything that we've talked about. And as Drachma was saying, if you see something that intrigues you, you can get an episode number there and go hop into that episode and check out our discussion. Every now and again, we kind of have a couple games in the back catalog. We have to do some self-archaeology, I guess you'd call it, and figure out what episodes they were on. Right. But by and large, it's pretty well set up. So with that, we'll get into our games. Buddy, you want to go first or second? You know what? Boot's choice.
Doesn't matter to you today, huh? Your game is not first or second heavy?
No, I would say it's a pretty standard pick all around in that it is not short. I can actually talk about it, which is not always the case. And it's not a closer. So You know what? I'll go first. Why not?
Okay.
I'll go. I'll offload the burden of choosing from you, and I'll do it.
Thank you.
So here we are, folks. 90 episodes of IndieQuest later. I'm ready to bring you another video game, and I am going to discuss with you all the very recently released Arranger, a role puzzling adventure. Now, Drachma, what's your experience with this game? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?
I've seen this. I've heard about this mostly because I knew that you were going to be playing it based on our chats in the Discord. Yes, it is from what I've seen, a very pretty puzzle game, but I'm interested to hear about it.
Yes, we were provided a code by Humble, so be aware of that. However, all these opinions are, of course, my own, but that is also why Drachma knew, because he was seeing the discussion around it. So I couldn't be quite as coy a boy as I sometimes prefer to be. Arranger, a role-puzzling adventure, is developed and published by Furniture and Mattress LLC. They have a very delightful little jingle when you start the game.
That is awesome.
That says the name of their studio, which I quite like. And as it says right there on the tin, it is a role-puzzling adventure, which is a bit of a genre mashup between RPG and puzzler. I will say, in my experience, it is a little more puzzle-heavy than RPG-heavy, but we will get into that as we go along. Last couple of details to be aware of. As I said, it's a new release. It just came out on the 25th of July of this year, 2024. And it is available on PC, PS5, Switch, and mobile via the Netflix game service. Those games that Netflix lets you play if you are a Netflix subscriber. I played, as you will probably not be surprised, the PS5 version of this game, as I tend to do. So, Arranger. In Arranger, you play as this character named Gemma, who is an arranger, which is initially something that you're not really sure what that means in the context of the world and in the story. But in a practical application, what that means is that you have the ability to basically rearrange the world. How that actually plays out is that you can move. The entire world is on a grid. This is a block pusher in the most reductive sense. The entire world is on a grid, and when you move any direction, so you can move, left, right, up, or down, every tile in that row or column, depending on which way you moved, will shift one square in the direction that you just moved, and then the one on the very far edge will loop around to the beginning of the row or the beginning of the column instead. So it's an endless loop, basically.
So it's almost like you're not moving your character, you're moving the tiles that your character is on, and your character's moving with the tiles.
But yeah, basically, yes. And you're moving the rows and columns of tiles to shift your character around and also to shift other objects around too. So when I say everything on these tiles moves, I mean it. Like characters that you can talk to, signs that point you towards your next destination, random objects like refrigerators, tables, chairs, ducks, bread, all that will also shift around. And a lot of times that is just kind of like set dressing, but sometimes it's relevant for puzzle solving too. So as Gemma, it's a quest that starts out and you don't really have too much in the way of like broad story or context on the world or the environment. Maybe not as much as you would expect from an RPG, but Gemma is an arranger, which seems to place her a little bit out of the norm in this town that she lives. You can tell that she's a bit of an outsider. And basically at the start of the game, as you'd expect in any good RPG, her goal is to set out from her hometown, kind of Pokemon style, really with no objective other than to explore the world, see the world. The town that you start in is a very reclusive town. Like, they're very protective. They kind of keep the door to the town barred shut to keep the people inside of the town safe. And so she's just kind of looking to see what the wider world has to offer and maybe learn more about why she is the way that she is. The reason that the town is so protective, reclusive, is that there is this force in the world that people don't really fully understand called static, and Gemma is also sort of trying to understand what the source of static is. In the game, that visually manifests in this like sort of pinkish, bluish, neon sort of glow that characters get, and it also has a gameplay mechanic in that objects and people that are infected with static or have a static presence about them that are colored in the static way cannot be moved, and they serve as barriers to the shifting of the tiles.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is let's say there's a row of tiles, and the very right tile is a rock that is not static, when I move one square to the right, that rock is going to move all the way over to the left side of the same row. If it is static, I'm not going to be able to move to the right. It will stop me, as if everything is traffic jammed.
So you cannot move at all your character on those tiles that way. Like
Correct.
Okay. So your character can't even go right at all on that. You'd have to go down, right, then back up to actually move right in that instance. Correct.
Yeah. You can't. Yes, you can move over to it, but if you're pushing up against it, you can't push it along. And if objects are pushing against it, then you can't move at all. So not super relevant. It's much more intuitive when you're playing, but yes, the long and short of it is that static will stop you from progressing. And so there's a lot of puzzles built around how do I, this otherwise would be an easy environment to navigate. How do I navigate this environment with these static objects blocking sort of the most logical path of exploration? And exploring is very much the term. So because this is, a quote unquote role-playing game or role-puzzling game, as you set up from the town, you will go to like multiple different sort of like, I would call them like overworld lights. There's no like world map like you think of in an RPG, but there are definitely areas that are primarily there to serve as connective tissue. And then there are towns, and then there are more traditional like dungeons. Not traditional in the sense that they're all like, blue caves with torches on the wall, but traditional in that they feel like this is the dungeon, sort of the focal point of this area that you're going to explore. You move around, you'll be shifting, you're moving very quickly after a while. You get very good at navigating the world when there is no friction at all, especially using the edge of a map to warp you to the other edge of that map. Because if you think of it, like, often there's like a walkway that is just a one tile row or column, just like a connected series of single tiles in a row or column. You'll get used to like almost like fast travel, pushing into the wall opposite of the direction that you would normally typically walk if this was like a Zelda game. And that'll shoot you all the way to the next intersection. And then you push against the wall opposite of the next pathway, and that'll shoot you all the way to the next intersection. And so you can kind of like, in like 6 moves, you can shoot all the way across the world very, very quickly. And it feels kind of cool. It feels nice to navigate around in that way.
This is a weird time to ask this question, but I feel like it's relevant based on you explaining that. How long does it take to beat this game? And is it a speedrunner's dream?
Yeah, I think honestly, in terms of puzzle games, it would be a bit of a speedrunner's dream.
Okay.
So much so that when you are starting up the game, one of the few things that the game prompts you and asks you is, do you want to enable the speedrun timer to always show on screen? And do you want to enable the step counter, the total number of squares that you've moved?
Yeah,
so
because of course the speedrunner is going to want to get that down.
Lower it as much as possible, right? And like take the most efficient routes through things. So to answer your actual question, it took me about 5 hours or so to get through. It's probably, I would say it's like a 4 hours if you mainline it. There is some side stuff to go in and do, some optional dungeons and places to explore. And if you do all of that, it'll be more like maybe a 5 to 6 hour experience, depending on how good you are at puzzles and, how much your brain sort of clicks with the logic of the game. And I say it in that way because there is times, at least for me, my experience was there were times in this game where I was sort of intuiting the solution that I needed before I felt like I was actually consciously thinking about it. Oftentimes, like, my hands would work faster than my brain in some of the easier puzzles, almost like a rhythm game, where you just sort of know the right inputs to take and instinct. End up on the other side. Yeah, right. Like it's in that way, it is very intelligently designed. So there's also going to be situations where you need to manipulate objects to move them around in a variety of ways, of course. And so, the most basic of those might be you need to move a rock or a potted plant onto a switch. And, it's a little more complicated than just pushing it onto the switch, because you're having to move rows and columns of tiles in order to shift that to the right place, understanding that if you need to move, like if you need to walk around it or something like that, your movements may inadvertently shift it out of place. Right. And so, especially in cases where there's multiple objects that you need to place into the correct spot simultaneously, you really have to be like considerate and like picking and choosing your moves carefully.
Yeah, sounds a little bit like single player chess in that way, where you're trying to think 3-4 moves ahead so that you're not screwing yourself when you get there.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. Yes, and oftentimes I would do the dopey thing where my brain sometimes just slid back into normal video game mode, where I'm so conditioned by playing tons of 2D Zelda games and stuff like that, where I would do 2/3, 3/4 of a puzzle, all of the sort of hard logic would be done, and I would just need to kind of move the last 2 things into the right place, and without even thinking about it, I would just sort of instinctively start pushing it as if it was a normal game, pushing these blocks, and then I would place the last thing on the last switch and nothing would happen. I'd be like, what? And then I'd look at the rest of the puzzle and be like, oh, I just moved 2 of them off the switch in the way that I was pushing things around because I stopped thinking about what I was supposed to be doing. So it's easy to fall back into bad habits, or maybe good habits formed from other games.
A very different game, but I also played the same game that you played last episode, Leap Year. And that has a very similar situation where you fall into this. It's a video game trap that it knows it's going to get you with, right? And it kills you in ways that other games would not. So,
yeah, which I think is actually a very fun design choice, is games that like kind of playfully punish you for just like autopiloting using video game logic. So I did enjoy that part, even though you think it was just like an inconvenience. Oftentimes I was like, oh, all right,
got me.
That's my own fault. Yeah. Fair on you. And so, in terms of like the way that the game then moves around, it is called a role-playing, role-puzzling adventure. So you're saying, what is the role-playing half of that? And that's where it's a little light. I would say it's not like false advertising on the tin, but I went in expecting a more 50-50 split of puzzle and role-playing, and I would say that it is 90% like a puzzle game, like a Baba Is You style puzzle game, and 10% role-playing. The role-playing really comes into play in probably 2 major ways. The first is just the general structure of the game, sort of moving from one town to the next, this sense of adventure. You're meeting different characters, doing side quests, finding and exploring dungeons. There are boss fights and things that you'll eventually come across. And then the other side of the role play, I guess, is the combat side, which is actually pretty infrequent, but you will come across a number of situations throughout the game where there are these creatures born of static. So they're enemies. They don't attack you. They are essentially just barriers. They're just roadblocks. You can't take damage. There's no health in this game or anything like that. But these enemies, these monster mobs, will stand and block your forward progress in the game. And in those screens, oftentimes there will be a sword on the ground, and you need to move, shift the tiles to connect, to basically push the sword into the enemy, and that will kill them and like their trail of goo, their like purple smoke goo that will then clear the path forward for you. And so there are, a number of different, sometimes you do 3, 4, 5 of those encounters back to back to back to back, where you're having to attack the enemy with a sword. And so when I went in, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was like, my brain for whatever reason thought turn-based RPG, but it's much more RPG in the sense of a Zelda game, and it's very light. And so if you don't think of Zelda as an RPG, this is functionally just going to be a puzzle game for you.
I was thinking, based on screenshots, I I would have been interested, certainly, if it was turn-based, but I didn't see any screenshots of turn-based combat.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like, not roguelike, but Sheeran the Wanderer Mystery Dungeon style based on the way you move. And just enemies would chase you down and have health and stats, but obviously that's not the case.
Yeah, that's actually a really good like reference point for folks that have played those games, any of those tile-based, movement-based dungeon crawlers. This is very similar to that. There's just not the enemies that you bump into, really.
Right.
There may be one or two situations that I'm like forgetting about where that is the case, but by and large, that is not the experience of playing through the game. Even the bosses, I guess I don't know for sure, but my understanding of how most of the bosses worked is that they're basically just like big background portraits for the puzzles, and you could take as long as you need to solve the puzzle to deal damage to the boss.
Oh, okay.
There's at least one boss I'm thinking of that it's not that big of a spoiler. It's one of the earlier bosses, so I'll just share it. But if you think of the traditional Zelda boss, I forget the name of it, but the one where it's like a snake and you have to attack its tail, swipe its tail with your sword, the very like far end of the tail. There's a boss that is like somewhat similar to that you have to manipulate its positioning using the tile shifting. So, but yeah, it is very light in terms of RPG mechanics, but a little heavier in terms of RPG trappings. And it's definitely a relatively story heavy game. Not like you're sitting through 15-minute cutscenes or anything like that, but for a puzzle game, it is chatty. It talks to you a lot. There's a lot of different characters with different personalities, and they're cracking jokes and giving you sort of context for the world and the environment that you're in.
So what's your subjective take on the chattiness? Because I know you've been on both sides of the fence when it comes to chatting in certain video games.
That'll kind of transition me to the themes of the game. And some of this is right there on the Steam page. In fact, I'm going to even pull up the Steam page for this game, which I usually don't do because it'll help guide my discussion here. Let's go to Steam, Arranger, Roll. Spoilers, you can't just search Arranger these days. But Steam says it's find your way in a world of breezy, thoughtful puzzles along a charming journey of self-discovery. And so, I mean, they're putting it right up there front and center. This game has a very heavy emphasis on discovering yourself, finding sense of self, being at peace with decisions you've made. Almost some of the same themes that I think come up in Chicory, A Colorful Tale, but a little more in this game focused around you are in charge of your own life and you can make it the best that it can be through your own actions and through your own efforts. And so it has a very, it's a heartwarming sort of theme. It's motivating. It's good. It's solid, but it's pretty heavy-handed in how the game delivers it to you. Like, there's not that much room for subtlety. The game will come out and basically say everything I just said at various points. And so while the dialogue is, sometimes good and sometimes charming and often at the very worst inoffensive, there were some times where I was like, I feel like you're kind of repeating yourself once or twice. You're like, I kind of got it. All right. I'm sort of already clicking into what you want me to click into. Mm-hmm. So that said, it's very fast to skip it all if you want to skip it. I will say I missed one trophy in this game, so I ended up replaying half of it again. And when you know what to do and you're clicking through dialogue, it cruises, man. Also, side note, but before I forget, there is an option to basically skip any puzzle in the game. And so any puzzle you don't want to do, you can turn on this option in the menu and there'll be a little tile at the beginning of the puzzle and you can just jump right to the end of it. So if you do that, you can play through the whole game in 20 minutes if you skip the dialogue and the puzzles.
Wow. That allows you to get back to where you need to be for trophies, I imagine, quickly.
It was very nice, yes, because there is a point of no return that there's kind of 2 points of no return, and I was not paying attention for the first one, and so I had to get back somewhere to do one minor thing, and it took me, 15 minutes to get like halfway through the game, which is pretty pretty wild.
If someone, since you talked about the story, just one last bit about the story. If someone is brand new to this game and is going in thinking like, I really could care less about the story, would you suggest skipping it then? Or is it worth experiencing?
I would say feel out the dialogue in maybe the first half an hour of the game to get a sense for tone, sense of humor, pacing, that type of thing. And if you're intrigued by what you experience in the first half an hour, or maybe until you leave that first town, stick with it and you'll have a good time. And if you're kind of neutral to bored by that point, skip through it. It's not enabled by default, but there is another option in the game that you can go into the menus and enable to basically always have a quest marker on screen to always point you to the next place you need to go. And so if you want more of just a pure puzzle experience, you could turn that on, skip through a lot of the dialogue, and probably have more of the puzzle game play style.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's generally how it plays. They do add some variety. They mix it up. They do some different things, add mechanics with like rafts and all sorts of stuff. You'll discover those as you play through the game. So there is, I would say, a moderate amount of mix up, and it never gets particularly difficult in my experience. There was never a puzzle that I sat on and scratched my head for more than maybe 5 minutes at most. So you'll be able to get through it pretty painlessly if you're a puzzle game aficionado. If you're someone that plays these games a lot, you'll probably have a pretty easy time. Or if you don't play these games a lot, this is probably a pretty good one to start with because it's got a creative puzzling mechanic and the difficulty is tuned pretty reasonably. And like I said, you can skip anything that is a little too hard for you. So
this seems like a prime game for create your own level. Is there any create your own level part?
There's not, but I agree. This would be a really cool game to have, like some sort of fan
build some for your friends
mod community or custom user generated content. That would be awesome. But at least right now, that is not the case. So, then, some of the other sort of housekeeping things on it. It has this really interesting visual style. So I was talking about the story is a little more RPG-ish. A lot of the story cutscenes are told in static image kind of slideshows or like comic book panels where they sort of like layer images of different sizes on top of each other that show you key moments of a cutscene. There's not any like dialogue in those. It's just still screen caps, and I think that's pretty common in games like this because it's more affordable and reasonable to create a story that way than it is to animate a bunch of stuff.
Right.
But then they also did this interesting thing where for either like non-story related things or like stuff that is just more filling in details of the environments and the places you're navigating through, it almost puts these like floating painted images behind the play space in like the void that would just exist behind the tile set.
Yep.
And so as you're moving along, you'll like move past these different images that show you like, maybe show you moving through a forest, and they'll maybe show you like a tree with sunbeams coming down through the leaves. And then you'll walk past another one that's showing like, a couple little chipmunks moving along just to give you like a little more of a sense of place, a little more sense of variety and style. Very colorful game. The character designs really reminded me of Braid, weirdly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, if anyone knows what the main character from Braid looks like, all the characters in this game look like they're done by the same artist. I don't know if that is the case or not. I would imagine it's not, but it's a striking similarity in my mind. It's very interesting. And then, the music that plays as you go along. This is kind of always true in puzzle games, but the music is pleasant but inoffensive. It doesn't get in the way or distract you. It's a lot of like plucky guitars and just sort of like lighthearted exploration type music, mostly pretty optimistic other than the boss fights where things get a little bit more intense. So any questions on the game before we wrap it up?
I think that I kind of laid out the majority of my questions. I'm looking at a couple screenshots here, and you might have mentioned this, but if I'm on a column and I have multiple gaps in between, can I go to the bottom and then skip back to the top? And do I skip over gaps, or do gaps stop you from moving? Do you like function on just the one piece between the two gaps, or if it's on the screen, do you have the entire column and gaps, basically, right?
That is a good question. It is all of the tiles in a row or column that are
Connected.
contiguous, that are connected.
Oh,
and that includes connected by objects, even objects that are static. But any gap you will not cross over. And sometimes that is a very relevant puzzle mechanic where sometimes you are on sort of islands of tiles and you're needing to manipulate things in such a way to move objects to create, quote unquote bridges that then let you wrap around to the other side of that other island and move that way. So that is something that they've definitely thought of and is very intentional. Oh, it is the artist of Braid. Okay, I'm looking at the Steam trailer. I should have looked this up ahead of time. I'm looking at the Steam trailer for the game. It is from the artist from Braid. So there you go.
That's super cool. I wonder what that guy or person has worked on other than Braid in this game. I have no idea.
Actually, wild too. Yeah. So the artist from Braid and the writer from Carto, which we
really
just
that's
up top.
Sweet.
What a relevant game here. We
No
appreciate
kidding.
this
Awesome.
arranger. Thank you very much. So now it's all clicking into place. So sorry to step on what you're saying there, but too cool.
That's all I had. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good to close that loop.
Beautiful. Now you all know, and you all know exactly how much preparation I do. I take a bunch of notes of my experience, but I don't take a bunch of notes about the production of the game.
Yeah.
So we learn together in real time. But
that's right.
that is going to do it for us as I try to grab this moth that is flying around my computer monitor. So I'm going to go ahead and close her out with my opinion and where it places on the quest log.
Heck yeah.
Thought about this one for a while. I think that you can make a compelling argument in either direction. And this is one that I think ultimately for me lands as a side quest. It doesn't really do anything wrong. It's not like there's one glaring problem. I could maybe say that I wasn't always super wild about the pacing of the game, or I would like to see a little more variety or a little more difficulty. All that is true, but I still think that the core product there is very good and very enjoyable. It's just, it's something about it just misses that wow factor. Every now and again you play a game and something intangible about it is like, whoa, this is something special. And when I played this one, I was like, you know what, this is something cool. And to me, that feels like a very comfortable side quest placement in terms of this game. But I still had a great time with it. I was happy to play all the way through it. And that's a Ranger.
I think that based on what you've said about this game, I have started to play a lot more puzzle games. We talked about Carto, and I'm looking through, as I always do, Google Images on this game, and there is a Ranger Carto bundle right now on Steam. You can buy them both together for, I imagine, some sort of discount. But I think that I would probably have to agree, if I were to play this game, that this would probably be a side quest game for me, purely because I would have gone into this game hoping for more RPG. Yes. If you're going to call yourself an RPG, if I knew going in that a Ranger was a puzzle game, then I'm going to be completely content with that. But if you're going to call yourself an RPG, I want some sort of like more RPG elements than what it sounds like it's giving, right? So
yeah, and I felt the same way, and I'm sympathetic to the fact that they can't say a Ranger a Zelda puzzling adventure and just use the Zelda name, and there really isn't another way. We don't have like Metroidvania or gated exploration or some other term to refer to Zelda games without using the name, and so there was a little bit of whiplash there for me too, or a little bit of maybe disappointment in terms of like, oh, this is more puzzle than not, which is not usually a problem for me. Puzzle games are some of my favorite games out there, right. But I was ready to see maybe a little bit more of an interesting mix than I got.
For sure. Okay. Well, very cool game. Glad you played it and brought it. And anybody that sounded like it was a good game should go out there and check it out. It just came out, and we are becoming much more topical these days in terms of new game releases. So, speaking of new game releases, last episode, Steve, I brought Another Crab's Treasure.
You did.
And you said to me, "Oh my gosh, Drachma bringing a somewhat relevant game. That's very surprising." And I agree. So I had to rectify that.
Oh no! All right. What 2013 game did you bring us?
I didn't. I brought a new game, but I guarantee you have not heard of it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now you're gonna be,
let's
I've
test
definitely
this
heard.
theory. And crack these knuckles. Get ready to lie, even if I have never heard of it.
Purely because this game has like 50 reviews on Steam. So I highly doubt it.
All
It
right.
is called, I think, Recolit
All right. Yeah, I've never heard of this game. How do I spell it?
or Recolit. Recolit.
Oh, all right. All right. I like the little banner. Tell me more.
So I believe that this game, I played it on Steam, and I know it's on itch as well. I could not find a lot of information on this game because it's fairly unknown, as I've already said. There's not a lot of information on it. I think that it could be on Switch, but I did not do enough research to confirm that. But I saw some things here and there where it was like adjacent to Switch ads, so I think there's a possibility it's on there.
Okay.
It released February 16th of this year. Developed and published by Image Labo and Marodice, and then just published by Yokazi. And from what I can tell, a while back now, it was probably well over a year, maybe a year and a half ago, we had Jimmy Hoppa on here and talked about a lot of old indie games, but talked specifically about, because he lives in Japan, we talked about Japanese developed indie games and how I felt at the time that I didn't know very many. It doesn't seem like Japan, we know Japan as being a huge AAA developing country, but not a lot of indies. So
True.
Kind of cool that this is a Japanese indie game because, I associate a lot of my video games with Japan, but cool. Not a lot of my indie games are associated with Japan, so kind of cool to play that. This is a pixel art 2D side-scrolling puzzle adventure with what I would call point-and-click elements. And if all of that kind of gets you to, like, I still don't really know what this game is, honestly, this game reminds me, especially towards the end and once I had played through the entire game and knew what the game had to offer me, it reminds me so much of A Space for the Unbound.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
So, going right into presentation, Steve, you're looking at it. It is very pretty. As I already mentioned, the A Space for the Unbound references are going to be abundant potentially in my review because there's a lot of different ways that it looks like it. In a lot of ways, the sprites are very large. It's the pixel art style, very much that style of like, oh, how does a 16-bit beat 'em up look, right? Your final fight, except for this is much like cuter than that and much more pixelated, but that's kind of the character size that you're expecting and how you're walking back and forth on screen. That's what you get out of this. Lighting is extremely important. The main character has a light bulb on their spacesuit chest, and everything about this game is dependent upon lights being lit up so you can actually complete some of the puzzles that you're doing and help the NPCs. So that the lighting, actually, the look of the game because of the lighting is really cool. When things aren't lit, they're very dark, and when they are lit, you see so many more details. Sometimes there's some parallax in the background as you're moving. Sometimes when you walk to a certain edge and you realize, oh, I can't go this way anymore, it makes the entire screen shift so you can see something off of that whatever edge you walk to. The music, very simple but nice. Honestly, it's like the most sophisticated bleeps and bloops you've ever heard, if that makes any sense. If you think Game Boy music, very serene and calm Game Boy music, but like turn it up to 11. That's kind of what it sounds like. It reminds me a lot of certain sections of the One Shot soundtrack. So if anybody has played One Shot or listened to our episode on One Shot, it reminds me a lot of that in certain places. Also can be very atmospheric. Sometimes there's no music at all in the background. It's just birds chirping or crickets chirping, things like that.
All right.
The story is, I would call it, quite vague. So you start out, and a big reason I decided to play this game, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say when I say this to you, Steve. Of course, I'm going for Polykill Bingo. Have to. It's our jobs in 2024. There is a square that says, play a space-themed game that includes a section of negative gravity, or basically you're floating, sort of, right?
One of the harder squares to get, even though it seems maybe intuitive. There's actually not that many games that we've found so far to satisfy that.
It truly, everybody has attempted to play every shmup ever, but that doesn't really seem like it should count, right? Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're in space, but come on, you have full control of your vehicle. You're not floaty at all.
Yep. This
game is towing the line, I would say. So I'm gonna have to get your opinion on whether I can count this or not in real time.
I didn't expect to do a rules call on IndieQuest of all places. Usually that's where I get hassled in the Discord to do that.
At the beginning of this game, your character is very clearly in space in a pod floating.
All right.
That to me is negative gravity. Then you crash to the planet. And for the rest of the time, it is still space themed. There's a lot of space theming, but you don't ever go anti-gravity again.
But are you distinctly floating in the pod?
Oh, yeah. If you're looking at the Steam page right now, I think there is either the beginning of the video or one of the pictures is your character literally wrapped up into a ball in this pod, looking like they're in a womb, very clearly floating in space. So, anyway, we can chat about that later. Right. I'm hoping it counts. But to me, everyone out there listening to this, if you're still looking for one of those, I think this should count. If it was in my rule book, it would count. But old Steve can be a little bit of a stickler sometimes. So,
what I've seen, it seems legitimate, but we'll hammer it out.
You're an unnamed astronaut. You, like I said, crash this planet. And as you wander out of the ocean and onto this beach, you start to meet these orange, ghostly-looking NPCs. None of them have faces. Your character distinctly has a face, but none of the other NPCs have faces at all. They're kind of ghostly orange. They're not shimmering. They're kind of like a solid thing. And once you interact with them, they seem like they can see you and they can talk to you, at least most of them. What I'm kind of driving at here is the story. I called it vague. It ends up being very player interpretable, I would say. As you go through, and even towards the end, you're going to have to kind of make your own judgment call on what's going on in certain sections. If that is like a hard, I don't like that in my games, then I'll tell you right now, maybe this isn't for you. For me, it was a little bit frustrating. I was very engaged and intrigued in what was going on, and I wanted to find out because, like A Space the Unbound, like To the Moon, we play those games to get a finalization of what the hell was going on as I was playing this game the entire time. If I don't find out what's going on with River at the end of To the Moon, I would not be very happy. I can tell you that. I would be very disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, it's all down to how the story is written, right? And whether or not they're trying to leave it up to interpretation or
right.
theory.
And I would say that this really is on the fence between intentional and just like, did they just not know how to wrap it up? It was kind of strange. So I will say that some people don't even care. They're going to skip through every single time that you talk to anybody and you don't care about that, and totally get it. If that's you, then that's fine. I think that the story is certainly worth experiencing, but the payoff was not my favorite.
Speaking of story, I don't know if this is just, coincidence from the one screenshot that's on Steam here, but there's a text box that's like half English, half gibberish. Is that relevant? Is that part of how they obscure the story, is by not giving you the actual text?
So, sort of. Your name is in that gibberish completely, so you're kind of, you're an unnamed I said unnamed. Technically, you have a name. As you're going through, at least the very beginning of the story, you are led to believe that you are an alien on this planet. But as you're playing through it, it's like, no, some of these characters know me. And they know who I am. Which it ends up, I don't want to spoil too much more, especially if people want to go play it, but certain things aren't what they seem, but then are they? It doesn't ever like exactly answer that for you perfectly. So that's I would say for me personally, that was one of the most frustrating parts about this game was the story. I was pretty invested and wanted to see a good ending, and to me, it just didn't give us. I'm okay with like it being up for interpretation to a point, but this one was a little bit too much so, I think, personally. So anyway, on to the gameplay. It is a puzzle adventure, like I said. You kind of walk back and forth, talk to NPCs. They typically you don't walk up and talk to most of them. It's as you walk by them, a speech bubble will pop up. They'll be talking. You can choose to listen, or you can choose to continue about your business and keep moving to whatever objective you had to walk to. For the most part, how this game works, there's like a general loop, right? You will listen to an NPC or 2 or 3 at the beginning of each chapter, whichever ones you can actually access from the beginning of the chapter. And they will say certain things, and typically they'll say something along the lines of, I'm missing something, I want to go somewhere, and you have to find out and figure out, based on the items that you can pick up, how do I get them what they need, or how do I lead them to their destination?
Okay.
That's the general loop. Now, it's pretty simplistic, probably sounds pretty simplistic. The major hook in all of it, I mentioned at the top that lighting is extremely important. Each time you solve an NPC's dilemma, lights in the world will light up. You cannot pick up items unless there is a light shining on that item.
Oh, interesting. So is there like an order of operations type of
typically
solve that you need to do sometimes?
Yes, a lot of times there is. The other thing is, once you pick up an item under a light, you can then put it back down where it was, or you can put it back down under any other light, but you cannot drop an item in the darkness, which makes sense, right? Because you might not ever be able to light it up again, and the game doesn't want you to soft lock it and make you have to like reset. So that's like the major hook in this game and what makes it difficult, sort of, sometimes. In general, it's typically not very hard. You were talking about order of operations. I would say the thing that's challenging, quote unquote, in this game is that you have to figure out the order in which the NPCs need to be solved. You're going to have 3 or 4 that tell you things that they need. Typically, only 1, maybe 2 of them can actually be solved as soon as you start a chapter.
Yeah.
You have to find their stuff, and then once you complete their stuff, they either give you something that you need to solve another one, or they light up a lamppost or 2 that allow you to access other items under those lampposts that you can then use for the other NPCs. And that is how the loop is and the general chapter flow of this game. Do you have questions beyond that?
Not about the specifics of that, but I'm curious, like, how difficult does it get? I get the vibe like this is maybe more like a To the Moon, where the puzzles are almost a formality, but maybe it's more involved than that.
I would say it's certainly more challenging than To the Moon. It's not get the orb, break the orb, kind of shift stuff, or walk around till you find the thing and then take it to the person. Because of the whole order of operation thing, you kind of have to juggle items at certain points where it's like, okay, I got to put this item down so I can pick this one up, so I can move over here, put whatever in it I need so I can take it back here and put it onto the thing that's going to make it whatever it needs to be, warm it up, potentially, right? And then I need to go use the other item, and then I need to take this. It's a lot of that balancing. So I would say it's not so much puzzling in most of the ways. It's more management item management and making sure it's still puzzling. Like you have to kind of figure out there are actual like legitimate puzzles. None of them are hard, but there are legitimate puzzles in this game. But for the most part, you're just managing items because your character can only pick up one item at a time. You can't hold multiple items. You just hold it in your hand and walk around until you use it on whatever character. And sometimes you grab an item and you think, this is the one that they need. And you go over there and no, it's not, because they say nothing. So it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. I got to go find something else or use something else to go and try to make them happy. And then often once you do that, they'll either light lampposts or they'll go and uncover something else. They might walk with you and uncover a whole new puzzle that you have to figure out. But for the most part, a lot of them are shine the light here. Okay, I shine the light there. Okay, it unlocks that section. Now shine the light over here. Okay, that's really a lot of what you're doing here. This game can be beaten by a small child, I would say. Not, a 7 or 8 year old, probably.
Yeah,
for sure.
That makes sense. Like maybe not a lot of opportunities to like do too many things out of order or overcomplicate things. It sort of works out with a little bit of difficulty.
Right. Towards the end, the last chapter or two, you have a lot of things, a lot of NPCs, and a lot of things that you have to kind of manage in your head. Fortunately, you have what I would call an electronic journal that takes down all of the NPCs and what they're after, and it also takes down all the items that are in the current chapter, so you can look through each of them, as long as you pick them up, right? As long as you've seen them. It will tell you what their use is, and it will tell you what the NPCs are after, so you don't have to constantly walk back and talk to everybody again if you're wondering what they wanted, right? So for the most part, pretty easy breezy. I would say a worthwhile experience, pretty fun for what it is. So,
all right, nice.
After all that, unless you have any other questions, I'm going to throw it on the quest log.
No, I mean, I am intrigued. So I'm curious where you're going to place it, but it's a neat looking game.
It is. It is a very pretty game. Honestly, that factors into a lot of where I put it on the quest log personally. For me, it is a side quest. So you might think, he said, it's very pretty, and that factors into where he's going to put it. Honestly, the look, the sounds that you get from this game, it's kind of like a chill sensory experience if you're just looking for a couple hours, because this game is only a 2 to 3 hour game. So if that's what you're after too, you can beat this in an afternoon. I would say that personally, if it wasn't for the way it looked and sounded and how chill it was, I'm not sure it would make the quest log at all.
Oh, the rare tie between the side quest and
nothing.
The rest of the world, I guess.
Right. Yes. It is certainly worthwhile because of those things, and honestly, the gameplay is serviceable. It's pretty fun. Slightly monotonous if you're not into those kinds of games.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fun, I would say. Like I said, it could be beaten in an afternoon, and another part of the reason it's on the side quest or was even drifting towards the bottom of the side quest is because at full price, this is a $15 game. And for what it offers, I personally do not think that the value is there for this game. Okay. I bought it on sale for $12. I would, if I were to know the experience that I got, I don't know that I would buy it for $12 again. Based on the reviews that it has gotten, I imagine it will probably hit a deep sale sooner or later within the next year or two. And for 50% off, if it was $7.50, I would say that's very worth it at that point. And that's kind of where it would sit for me. But there are games out there, I've already compared it, but the look of it and kind of the gameplay loop is very similar to A Space for the Unbound, except for A Space for the Unbound just does everything so much better. So, unbelievably better. Yes.
A great example to illustrate why we have those two classifications, right? Like here are two games that are doing a lot of similar things that, one sort of separates itself from the pack very clearly.
So, that is Recolit. Recolit? Recolit.
You let us know how you would pronounce it. I swear we don't do this on purpose, but is this episode a little bit of a reaction, unintentionally, to our last episode where we had Scotch and Hobbies on, where we placed 4 games on the main quest, and here we are putting 2 on the side quest. We're trying to keep the scales even without thinking too hard about it.
I will be completely honest. I was looking for a bite-sized side quest, but I've gone into games that I thought were going to be side quests for me, like Planet of Lana, and it ends up shocking me so hard that I end up tilting it to main quest, right? So no game, like every game I think that we play is certainly kind of in one or the other bucket from the start where we think it would be based on what we've seen and what we know. But that does not mean anything once we hit start.
No. In fact, I would say quite the inverse of what yours was this time around. I went into a Ranger kind of expecting it for me to be a main quest because it looked gorgeous and it was 2 genres that I really enjoy. And I was like excited to see the mashup. And then through playing it, you just realize, this is actually more, this feels good as a side quest. So turns out playing the games is the biggest factor in deciding where we place them.
Exactly.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for sticking around. Hopefully you got a couple of recommendations there. Again, that's Recolit and Ranger. So, thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate you. If you enjoyed the show, you can get a hold of us via Twitter at IndieQuestPod, or much like Ava did, send us an email at IndieQuestPod@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to read them on the show. We're always looking for recommendations. Turns out, as we've run the numbers, we've done the math, and it turns out that with 3 hosts releasing 1 episode every 2 weeks, that's about 6 games a month. Turns out more than 6 indies release per month. And so we're falling behind and we'll never catch up.
That's right.
So please feel free to let us know your thoughts on games that we haven't missed. Either, nudge them to the top of our list, or at least help share with other listeners stuff that maybe we didn't get around to or haven't got around to yet. So if you want to find me, I'm at Twitch, Twitter, everywhere is Blinkoom, Blink-O-O-M. Drachma, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Captain Drachma, and of course in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. And you can access that Discord by going over to Patreon, searching Polymedia, and getting into I think the lowest tier gets you right into that Discord. Come hang out with us. And I will also mention that you can find Josh, our other incredible co-host, at Frantic Society on Twitter. And I think that's the main place that you can find him. And also in the Discord, you can find all 3 of us in the Discord.
Of course, yeah, and we're happy to chat with anyone over there. So, if you want to see the quest log, again, you can go to IndieQuestPod.com. That's where the quest log lives. And if you want to find out more about all the other shows on our network, the Polymedia Network, big variety of shows all about video games, movies, nostalgia, comedy, a big armload of shows exist over on PolymediaNetwork.com. I highly recommend you go check out some of the other stuff over there. I'm on other shows. Drachma frequently guests on other shows, so you can find more of us over there, but also, if you venture farther away from just us, you get good stuff too. So, with that, I think we did it. I think it's an episode. I think we can call it. Do you have any closing, parting thoughts, words of wisdom for the people out there?
We always tell people something along the lines of, hey, here's this thing that could make you feel good. Here's this thing, go do this, and have a chill experience and a chill night. All I'm going to say is, like I said at the top, one of the things that make everybody happy is a puppy. Just go buy yourself a puppy. It's easy. It's a happiness animal. You know what I mean? So,
yep. Don't think any harder about that. Just go buy one.
That's it. That's it. No thought going into it. All right. See you later.